Welcome to the NBAV podcast.
Welcome back to NBAV, the NBA Avenue podcast, where we are at the sunset of the NBA season. Every team in the league has either 2 or 3 games remaining on the schedule. And for a lot of those teams, that last game may not even matter. For many teams, considering how tight the races are, it may very well matter. And the prevailing thought in my mind, as we're about to head into the play-in games and then the playoff games with the proper 7-game series, is that there are 2 players in the league right now who are playing the game on a different level than the other however many hundreds of players there are in the NBA total. And those 2 players are Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic. These 2 great talents from Europe. And what I mean when I say that they're playing on a different level, even compared to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, even compared to Giannis, even compared to Anthony Edwards and all of these guys, is that these are 2 players in Luka and in Jokic who are playing the game in a way that looks like they're playing their own game. And the smiles that Luka gives you, and the confidence that he plays with, and the shots he knows that he can make, and the way he knows he can dominate any player who's defending him, is a very rare thing. It's a level of confidence that he plays with, and it's the same for Jokic, where they can do so many different things and take advantage of any defensive matchup against them, that it's different than what Giannis does. And I know Giannis is hurt right now, but it's different than even what Giannis did in the season where he won the finals, where Giannis has to try extremely, extremely hard and use incredible physical strength and leaping ability to do what he does. And take a guy like Anthony Edwards, who played against Jokic last night and wasn't victorious. He needs to try extremely, extremely hard and put forth a Herculean physical effort. And then when he scores and he gets the right bounce, he celebrates as if he's expending a lot towards that. Whereas Jokic has to hustle up and down the court, and he has to put forth what I would call more of a steady effort from beginning to end, where he's not going all out on every single play, but it's the accumulation of running up and down the court and never being able to take a play off that really douses him in sweat by the end of the ball game. But he seems to do it at a different level, where he goes against one of the defensive players of the year, one of the top defensive players over the last decade in Rudy Gobert, and he's able to channel a guard-like game. Meaning, he's not going to the prototypical post moves against Gobert. He does a little bit, but some of the time he's just taking the ball against Gobert and he's saying, if I can just put my head down and attack like a guard or a forward, I can just get to the hoop like that. And Jokic doesn't always do that. Very often he's a slower pace kind of way that he plods in, he turns one way, he turns his shoulder the other way, he tests a hook, he fades, he puts up the more two-handed shot, takes it from the top of the key and kind of probes around, and sometimes takes the straightaway 3, sometimes moves in and takes a nice swish shot, which he can get at any time from the top of the key. But he doesn't always take the ball and try to just clear out and do more of like something that LeBron would try to do, or something that another like Russell Westbrook in his heyday would try to do, where they just try to pound their way in as more of a guard or a forward type of mentality, whereas the center is maybe the more classic post moves, which Jokic also has. But last night against Rudy Gobert, it was him being able to just take the ball and charge in and just bounce Gobert backwards and then lay up the ball high off the glass, lay up the ball on the right side, lay up the ball on the left side, and he was really able to just do whatever he wanted against Gobert, who's at the top of the league in terms of defense. And Doncic, it doesn't matter who's taking him either. It's really the same type of thing. He can go to his step back shot, which nobody can really defend. He has a whole array of footwork. He has many plays like the other night where Dillon Brooks was defending him on the Rockets, and Dillon Brooks tried extremely hard, and it didn't really matter. Doncic knew that he had him at every single play. And Brooks put up a good game on the offensive end and made a lot of shots in that overtime game that really the Rockets had a great chance of beating Dallas in, and they ultimately came up short. But when players crowd Doncic, he's able to maneuver past them so easily, because when you overplay him, he has so many ways of just getting his head and his foot in there ahead of yours, and then you're behind him, and then he has just a wide open what looks like a wide open layup. But was it really a wide open layup from the beginning? No, it was more of, instead of playing off him, you played him all the way up. So instead of the battle taking place near the basket, the battle took place near the 3-point line. And once you lost that positioning battle where Luka broke your defense and got in front of you all the way back out there, from that point it turned into a wide open layup. But that's because the battle already took place. The battle was already won by Luka Doncic near the 3-point line. So what looks like a wide open layup was really him faking you out all the way back there. So Luka and Jokic, with these several different ways that they can play, and the looks on their faces and the smiles and the smirks, they're playing the game at a different level. It's them at 1 and 2. And then it's, I think, a little bit more distant, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 3, where he has to put forth tremendous effort and really tough shot-making ability at the end of ball games, but he doesn't have that, smile and his smirk to the game where he just knows he can dominate every single person. Very often he does dominate, but I think it's a little different. It's a tinge below what Luka and what Jokic are bringing to the table. And it's certainly different than what Edwards brings to the table, where it's a lot of physicality, and where Giannis brings to the table, where it's a lot of physicality. And I'm not saying that Luka and Jokic don't both have great physical attributes, but it's their overwhelming skill and the way that they can play the games like a guard, like a forward, or like a center. They can play the game in the post and from the 3, or like a guard. It's unbelievable what these guys are able to do. These two players better than the rest of the entire NBA. And it's different than what a team like Boston does, where Boston has that strength. They have the strength where they have so many strong players, and as a unit, as a team, they just go at you. And you don't know who to defend, and there's so many options on every play. Derek White has played great, but he's only like a third or fourth option. And Drew Holiday is a third or fourth option, behind Brown and behind Tatum and behind Porzingis. And Porzingis is even a third option. Having Porzingis and Holiday and White and Horford all as secondary options behind Tatum and Brown, guys who are all NBA players, they come at you like a unit, like a team. The Knicks come at you like a team. Sure, they have Jalen Brunson, who brings it, but then they have Josh Hart and DiVincenzo and OG, and they're a unit. They play like a team. And they have their own challenges, which make them super tough when you're facing off against them. But the way Luka and the way that Nikola Jokic play from a night-to-night basis, it's unlike anyone else in the league. It's 1 and 2 at the top, and it's everybody else behind them. And it's going to be super interesting, and that's what makes the Western Conference so crazy, because you're going to get an NBA championship level worthy caliber type game in a Western Conference matchup where you're going to get a Luka Luka and Kyrie and the Dallas Mavericks and their deep roster versus Jokic and his team, a little bit shallower roster, but alongside with Murray and alongside the experience that comes with that, and alongside the already having been there and already having done it and seemingly still having the hunger to do it again and getting the 1 seed again, which they basically got last night. By beating the Minnesota Timberwolves, there's a very, very, very strong chance that they are going to be the overall 1 seed in the Western Conference. And they're the 1 seed overall. The only team better than them is, like we already discussed, that Boston team in the Eastern Conference, where they do it totally different. where they win almost 80% of their ball games because their team from A to Z is so strong, but there's no one player playing the game at video game level like you have with Luka and like you have with Jokic. They're playing the game at a different level. Now, Tatum still plays the game at an amazing level, and so does Brown. And so do all of them, but none of them are playing it at that level where they're the top 1 or 2 players in the league, and there's a gap between 1, 2, and then 3 through 100. There's a gap even at the top. So incredible if you think about that. And it always amazed me when I thought about sports, and you think the level of college athlete and high school athlete, and between the level between a very good athlete and someone who plays in the NBA, and then how even at the top of the 1% of the 1%, there's a difference between the 500th best player and the 400th, and there's a clear difference between the 400th and the 300th best player. And then even as you get into the top 10 players in the league right now, there's Luka and Nikola Jokic at the very, very top, where there's a gap, there's a chasm between them and the rest of the league below them. It's unbelievable. There's a gap between 1, 2 to 3. At the level that they're playing, it's so unfathomable to think. How is there a gap between players like Luka and players like Jason Tatum? But there is. Luka's much better than Tatum. There's a real gap there in the way that they play. And Jokic to Anthony Edwards, there's a gap there. There's a big gap. And that's why the only 2 teams that I can see escaping the Western Conference and making it to the NBA Finals from the West are the Nuggets and are the Dallas Mavericks, because they have those guys. They have a lot of strength built around them too, don't get me wrong, but they have those guys, and that's where it starts with, and that's where it ends with. And they have complementary pieces as well, but it starts there. So that's where I see the league going. It's either you have the super strong unit of a Boston or of a New York Knicks, or you have a miraculous playoff performance like a Jimmy Butler who somehow scrapes it together for a small period of time in the playoffs, or you have one of those 2 guys, Luka or Doncic, all the way at the top. So what we saw last night in all of the games that played out was the Cavaliers were able to finally get a victory against a beat-up Grizzlies team. The Brooklyn Nets beat the Raptors, and the Raptors, it's so hard to understand what they're doing. They're playing all these guys like quickly who may not even be there. They're going to have to spend so much cash to retain him next season. And they play guys like Trent, and they play Olynyk, and maybe not last night, but as a whole, what are they doing? They're playing all these guys who may not be on the team next season, and the Nets still get the victory against them. You have Dallas, who's just this super consistent product at this point. Ever since the trade deadline, they've been a top 1 or 2 or 3 seed in the West, and that's why they moved all the way up to the 5th seed. And they're only 1 game back of the Clippers now that that Dallas won last night and the Clippers lost, and there's a chance maybe even something could switch around there. Maybe Dallas could even get the 4th, but it's going to be a 4-5 matchup between Dallas and the Clippers, and Dallas has been playing like better than a 4 and better than a 5. They've been playing like a 1 or a 2 ever since that trade deadline and ever since the All-Star break. Then you have the Hornets beating the Atlanta Hawks. Why is this significant? Because Trae Young returned, and they lose, dropping 115 points to a Hornets team who haven't been able to win games over the last 20 games ever since they went on a brief 4-game win streak after the trade deadline. It was straight back downhill for the Hornets. And somehow Trae Young returns, and the Hawks were playing better and better and better and better in his absence. And now he returns right before his favorite part of the year, the play-in. And now they lose to the Hornets? Really bad look. Really, really bad look for Trae Young and for the Hawks. The good news is that the game didn't really matter because the Hawks are already where they're going to be in the play-in game, trying to win back-to-back play-in games no matter what. So I guess they just have to try to integrate Trae Young in because he's going to be playing in that game, and that's for sure. He loves the play-in. He loves to try to put on a show there. Then the Bucks beat the Magic, so the Magic losing back-to-back games, something that they don't do very often, but because of that, it looks like they're going to be behind the New York Knicks. And currently, they're even behind the Cleveland Cavaliers by a full game. So the Magic and the Pacers are tied in 5-6. And the Cavaliers are 1 step above that, a game ahead of them at 4. And the Knicks are a half a game ahead of the Cavaliers right now at 3. The Knicks have won their last 2. So very, very impressive stuff on that team unit from the Knicks. And then in last night's games, with just finishing out the rest of it, you had the Thunder waxing the Spurs 127-89. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is back. He's been back for a couple of games, and he's showing the difference maker that he is on the floor as the Thunder are right there. They're right there tied with Minnesota in the 2-3 spot in the Western Conference. And then the Suns showing that they can beat the Clippers. The Clippers were severely shorthanded to an incredible degree. And in that game, you see that players play where there are players who get the opportunity to suddenly show their skills on the court, and we knew that Bones Highland had some skills. We've seen it in brief periods here and there. He has talent, that's for sure. And he kind of fits into a mold. There's a few ways I want to go with this, but there's a mold of point guard, which I've been noticing coming into the NBA, where you kind of have to be like a point guard slash two guard, where you're a point guard who could also score. You have to be able to hit the three. And there are several guys who kind of fit into that category, where their skills don't jump off the page, but they're pretty consistent from three, and they're kind of taller for a guard. And some of these guys are on the slender side. And there's just several of these guys who look similar to each other, and I'll give you a list right now, just off the top of my head. You have a guy like Bones Highland. You have a guy like Tyrese Maxey. You have a guy like Emmanuel Quickley. And you have a guy like Kobe White. They all have similar skill sets. And they all play the game in a very similar way, where they're most dangerous by shooting like a straightaway or a slightly over to one side wing three-pointer and driving into the basket, and they like the floater. All of those players are kind of good with the floater, especially Quickley and Highland, and Maxey a little bit as well. They're all very similar caliber of player, similar skill player. Their skills don't jump off the page, but when they're making their three-pointers, they're very, 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 very dangerous, and they can all drive in. And that's kind of their game. It's not like they have that slow speed to go to, per se, where like a Gilgeous-Alexander is a level above, or that super explosive way that Anthony Edwards is able to go one level above, or the footwork that a Luka Doncic has, where he's a level above in that way, and the shot making, the step back ability. But it's this caliber of point guard that's kind of interesting. It's really kind of interesting. I would even say DeJounte Murray, but DeJounte Murray is kind of better from two, and he's more diverse from two, and then he's a little bit more limited from three. But I think those four guys I mentioned, and Quickley, in Highland, Kobe White, and I forget the fourth guy who I mentioned, Tyrese Maxey, they're all kind of similar like that. But if double teams hit them, I don't know if they have another gear to go to. I don't know, as we've seen that when Embiid hasn't been on the floor, Tyrese Maxey has been kind of swamped. Like, you've been able to take him out of games when he's the number one option. And I think for all those guys, when they're the number one option, it's a little bit tough, especially when the other team is expecting it. And like, I know that last night, Bones Highland kind of did it out of nowhere. It was a game where you just expect the Phoenix Suns to be able to run all over you without Paul George, without James Harden, without Russell Westbrook, with none of those guys playing in the game. And then you would just expect Phoenix to run away with it, but Bones Highland comes out of nowhere and scores nearly 40 points in the game. What was the final total that Bones Highland put up in the game? If I could just quickly pull up the box score and see, how many points did Highland actually score in the game? It was 37. 37 points, nearly scoring 40 in the game. And you had 23 from Brandon Boston. It was kind of a quiet 23 from Boston. I actually didn't even expect that he had that many. Maybe he scored a bunch of it right in the final minute or two there when the game was already out of, beyond earshot of a potential comeback. So Phoenix, they did what they had to do. They won it late, but it had a very kind of tepid feel where Phoenix is like they're really pressing. They're really pressing, and they're not playing that free form basketball They're going a lot more. Devin Booker is deferring a lot to Kevin Durant to get Kevin Durant, which is, it seems like, is the most surefire shot. And I don't think you're seeing Booker playing his best basketball currently. He still has all the skills and all the talent, but you're not seeing the best of his abilities right now. He's a notch below where he's played, or maybe a couple of notches even below what he's played throughout his career when he's hit his best. And part of it is maybe just the factor of knowing that you have Kevin Durant next to you. And you know that any shot from Kevin Durant is maybe the most impressive, maybe the highest chance shot, better than even you. But I think it's about striking the balance between those three guys. And it's about finding the free form of basketball where you all feel like you're a unit. And at this point, when you watch a team like Dallas play, and when you watch the Nuggets play, and when you watch the Knicks play, and the Celtics play, and you're seeing teams really play like units, the Suns are still playing like individuals. They haven't, and it's not that they don't want to play like a unit. I think they do, but their lack of time together is really showing, and the lack of seasons spent together is really showing. And whatever gear that Luka and Kyrie have hit now at the year and a half, at the season and a half point where they suddenly turned it on to a new level like we've never seen the two of them hit before, it seems like they've hit it now. And the Suns have not hit that. In fact, they've maybe even moved further away. There's a bar that they have to break through. There's a wall that they have to climb over or break through or run around, which they haven't done yet. And currently where things are sitting in the Western Conference, the Pelicans are half a game up on the Suns. And each of those teams have 2 games remaining, right? If we can see the New Orleans the Pelicans have 3 games remaining. Kings, Lakers, and Warriors, tough schedule there. And the Suns have 2 games remaining, the Wolves and the Kings. So between Phoenix, between the Pelicans, between the Kings, it's this round robin of they're all playing each other, and we're just gonna have to see what happens in the final couple of games. The Pelicans won their last 2. The Suns finally got a win. The Kings are reeling. They're 5-5 in their last 10. Really the same for the Pelicans, but the Pelicans at least are a little bit on the upswing after they beat the Blazers. So it's very interesting to see the way it's going to ultimately shake out. But those are my real thoughts. It's Luka and it's Doncic. It's Luka Doncic and it's Nikola Jokic a step above, and they're one of those 2 teams are going to go to the finals from the West, probably against Boston, unless the unit of the Knicks can somehow upset the apple cart. But in the Eastern Conference, it's a battle of the units. The full team units of Boston and the full team units of the Knicks. And in the Western Conference, it's the depth behind these talents in Doncic and Jokic who are a step above everybody else in the league. And that's the way I see it. That's the way we see it here at NBAV. Follow us on social at NBA Avenue, NBAV, and email the show at nbavenue@yahoo.com. We're your source for a great time every time. And until next time, we are out.